Reviewing today, Rinkitink in Oz, the 10th book in the Oz series by L. Frank Baum, which I am reading out of the Complete Stories of Oz edition. Okay, right, so the preliminaries. I'm doing this series as a buddy reads with Dane Cobain over at Dane Reads. At the moment I'm filming this video, he hasn't yet posted his video review, although he posted a short written review over at his website. I will link to his channel down below. When he posts his video, I will update the description to link to his video, and in the meantime, I'll link to his written review. I am also relying off of the Wikipedia entry for this book, which I will link in the description down below, and also the review by Murray Ness at Tor.com. About 10 years ago, author Murray Ness did a review of all the books in the Oz series over at Tor.com, and I find her reviews very interesting and insightful. So I'll link to that down below and would recommend checking that out. I should emphasize, though, that I don't do the research until after I finish the book. And I mention that because after you do the research, there's something that clicks and you're like, of course. So I guess this might come as a bit of a spoiler if you prefer to read the book first without doing the research. But after doing the research, it turns out that this was not originally an Oz book. L. Frank Baum wrote this book in 1905 as a non-Oz book. I'm not entirely sure why it didn't get published in 1905. Maybe he couldn't find a publisher, or maybe he wanted to fine-tune it. But then 10 years later, in 1915, he was desperate for money. The only series of his that was selling well was the Oz series. He had tried to launch other series, but they hadn't done well. He had tried to end the Oz series, but came back to it because he needed the money. And apparently, according to Murray Ness, his publishers were hounding him for a new follow-up book. And so he just dug this one out of his archives and changed the ending. So at the very end, it becomes a crossover with the Oz series. Up until the last few chapters, it has nothing to do with Oz. But then at the very end, it becomes an Oz book. So as I was reading the book, it was of course obvious that it had very little to do with the Oz series. So I was originally thinking to myself, well, this must be because L. Frank Baum is a little bit sick of writing Oz stories. He wants to experiment with doing something else. Of course, at the very beginning, I had no idea where the book was going. The book starts out in a land outside of Oz. But then a few of these Oz books have started out in a land outside Oz. So I was waiting eventually for the characters to get transported into Oz. But the book kept going and going and going. And I'm like, boy, this is unusual. We're a quarter through, halfway through, 3/4 through, and we haven't even touched base with Oz or any of the other Oz characters. I just attributed it to the fact that L. Frank Baum wanted to do something different. But then after doing the research and finding out that it was originally not supposed to be an Oz book at all, it was like, of course. So the book is set in the Oz map. So there's a map of Oz and the surrounding lands around it, which you can find easily enough on Wikipedia. I'll try to remember to link to the map down below. So it's been established fairly early on, I think ever since book number 3. Was it book number 3? That there were all kinds of magical lands around Oz. So there was the land of Oz, and then there's the Deadly Desert, which separates Oz from everything else. And then all around the Deadly Desert, kind of forming a big rectangle around it, is all the other magical lands. Now, according to Wikipedia, the map of Oz first showed up in TikTok of Oz, which was book 8, I think, if I remember right. TikTok of Oz was book 8. Yes, book 8. But I'm not sure if that was a complete map or if the map got added to over the years. I think the map got added to over the years. Either that or L. Frank Baum was already planning ahead. But I don't think he was. But if you look at the map of Oz as it stands today, you have all the lands around Oz, which show up in various L. Frank Baum books. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, you have the non-stick ocean. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And 2 islands in that ocean up in the upper right-hand corner. Now, Wikipedia said that when this map was originally printed, there was an error. They had east and west reversed. And even as they updated the map over the years, they never corrected that error. So I guess when you're looking at the map, you can just reverse east and west. Not that it really matters for a magical fantasy world anyways. But yeah, in that ocean there are 2 islands. And so it is, he has, L. Frank Baum has put it on his Oz map, so to speak. If when we say Oz map, we're including all the other magical lands around Oz, and that's the connection. So it starts off in those islands, and it's essentially a fairy tale. Where's my copy of the Brothers Grimm? Hold that up for. Oh, it's all the way across the room. Okay, the last review I did, the Scarecrow of Oz, I held up the Brothers Grimm as a prop. So imagine I'm doing that now. I read through the Brothers Grimm half a year ago, reviewed it on this channel, and so feel like I have that fairy tale template fairly familiar in my head. And this is straight out of something of the Brothers Grimm, which was intentional, I believe. L. Frank Baum was studying fairy tales when he wrote his stories. So it's a classic fairy tale type story. There's 3 magic pearls. The blue pearl, which lends strength. The pink pearl, which protects you from any danger. And the white pearl, which gives you advice. If a character is holding these 3 pearls, they'll have incredible strength, they will be protected from danger, and anytime they don't know what to do, they can just consult the white pearl, and the white pearl will give them advice. And so you have a very ordinary boy who, through possessing these pearls, is able to overcome all these incredible obstacles that are put in his way. It's complete nonsense, of course, but if you go into it with the mindset of this is a fairy tale and just expect it to operate on fairy tale logic, it works like that. I actually used the same defense in my previous review of the Oz stories, the Scarecrow of Oz, which also was very fairy tale-esque and operated under fairy tale logic. But I think I may have spoke too soon, because this story seems much more like a fairy tale. Oh, I don't know. They're both like fairy tales, really. Right. So if you're familiar with fairy tales, you can probably guess what's going to happen. After going on several adventures with these pearls, the pearls get lost. And so that's how the then recovering the pearls becomes the next plot that needs to happen, and it's all, yeah, then they are recovered, and more adventures ensue, and it's all right. It's perfectly fine for a fairy tale. If I was going to nitpick, the big plot hole is that there are numerous times, I don't know, 3-4 times, when the boy doesn't know what to do. And as you're reading it, you're like, well, ask the white pearl. Ask the white pearl. The white pearl gives advice, and the white pearl always knows what's going to happen. And it's utilized inconsistently. There are some times when the boy asks for the white pearl for advice, and this moves the plot forward. And then there are some times when the boy should have asked the white pearl for advice, and he didn't. Again, having read the complete Brothers Grimm last year, I can tell you that this kind of inconsistency is all over the Brothers Grimm. So it's a fairy tale, fair enough, I guess. You just have to go with it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. The other thing I might nitpick is, so it's set up that you have the 3 pearls, and these are the magic elements in the story. But then other magic elements seem to just come out of nowhere. Like there's this magic boat that just comes to take the boy where he needs to go, or comes when the boy claps his hands. And you're like, well, wait a moment. Where did the magic boat come from? I mean, I understand he's got the 3 magic pearls, but the magic boat is cheating, right? That's something added. The magic boat seems to have some sort of connection with the white pearl. The white pearl is able to tell the boy how to summon the boat, or when the boat's going to come, and stuff like that. So, but the white pearl is not set up to have any additional powers other than to just give advice. Okay, again, it's a fairy tale. So the main character in this book is the boy, whose name is, I think, Prince Inga, if I'm remembering it right. The title of the book is Rinkitink in Oz, but Rinkitink's actually more of a side character, although granted he's the most memorable character. It really should be The Adventures of Prince Inga or something like that. But really, all of these Oz books are mistitled. This has been a common theme all throughout these reviews, as they always have a bit of a misnomer as the title. But Rinkitink is probably the most memorable character. So he's a fat king who, at the beginning of the story, arrives on the little island, and the island is not his. He comes from a bigger kingdom on the mainland, but he gets sick of being a king, and he sneaks away to escape from his subjects, and goes to the island where he just wants to visit the island and hang out. And to give credit where credit is due, I thought this part was well done. The islanders, he arrives. It's a small provincial island. They do have their own king and queen, and they do have their own palace, but they're in awe of the mainland and the power of the kingdom on the mainland. And then all of a sudden, here comes the king from the mainland. And they're like, well, what do we owe this honor to? What's going to happen? They're all a little bit shocked and awed. And then the king from the mainland turns out to be this really fat king who just makes all these stupid jokes and then laughs at his own jokes, and a very funny type laugh. And so nobody's quite sure what to make of this contrast between the dignity of the office and the ridiculousness of the person. But then you hear this voice when the king first arrives. You hear this voice coming from the boat, saying like, "Stop it! You're making a fool of yourself again." It's this voice just scolding the king every time he does something stupid or says something stupid. And it turns out that that voice is coming from one of the crates inside the boat where the king's goat is being kept. So the king has this pet goat, which is his companion, in which he rides along. He rides on the goat anywhere he goes because he's too fat to walk. And the goat is just this surly, grumpy creature who's always upset that the king is making stupid jokes and always upset that the king is laughing too much or doing ridiculous things. And so that contrast, because he's such a powerful king, it seems a little bit strange that he's being spoken to so rudely. But the goat is the only one who's able to get away with it because of the closeness of their relationship. So when I first read that, I thought that was brilliant, perfect comic pairing. It was at its most funny right at the beginning, and I think the humor had diminishing returns as the book went on, because the more you got to know this King Rinkitink, the more ridiculous it seemed, and then it, at a certain point, it did not seem like his office had any dignity or that there was any reason to think of him as a dignified person. And then the contrast between his office and the way the goat was speaking to him became less funny. But it's okay. The goat remains a fairly comic figure throughout the whole story, more or less. And then King Rinkitink is accompanying Prince Inga on his adventures. Now, spoiler alert, at the end of the story, it turns out that Bilbo the goat is actually a prince of the land of Bobo, which is also on the map of L. Frank Baum's territories, that was long ago enchanted by an evil magician and turned into a goat. But the Wizard of Oz, who at this point in the series has acquired genuine magical powers, and Glinda the Good Witch is able to turn him back into a human being. Neither Wikipedia nor Marie Ness mentions this explicitly, but somebody in the comments in Marie Ness's review says something about how the thing about Bilbo the Goat really being an enchanted prince was part of the rewrites that L. Frank Baum did when he wanted to make this into an Oz story. And the commenter said, this just completely ruined the character. The character was much better when it was just a grumpy old goat instead of a prince being enchanted in the goat. Sorry, prince being enchanted and turned into a goat. I searched around and I can't find that anywhere else, so I'm reluctant to put too much faith into what a random commenter says, but it seems to hold true. I mean, it does. It is like if L. Frank Baum did just rewrite the ending of the book, this ending where it turns out the goat was a prince all along is something that is completely out of left field and wasn't set up at all before. I mean, to give credit where credit is due, it was a surprising plot twist. I certainly was not expecting it. But yeah, the character of Bilbo as a grumpy goat was funnier when it was just Bilbo as a grumpy goat. And the contrast is increased when you consider that the prince does not have the same personality as Bilbo. The prince is shown to be very shy and polite. And the prince apologizes to Rinkitink and says, I'm sorry I was so surly to you. That surliness was actually part of the enchantment. When the wizard put me under the enchantment, I also inherited the grumpy disposition of the goat. Which does seem to be spoiling the character a bit. But I don't know. I looked these characters up on Wikipedia and on the Oz Wiki. And they don't really pop up in any of the subsequent Oz books, anyways. There is, I guess, book number 36, called Lucky Bucky in Oz, which was one of the later books, which was written after L. Frank Baum was dead. Apparently, they do make a cameo appearance, and there's some hint that Bilbo was changed back into a goat, because Rinkitink is again riding a goat. It sounds like it's just a very brief appearance, and other than that, it doesn't sound like these characters have any continuing influence on the Oz legacy. I mention that because usually once characters are introduced, they continue to make cameo appearances in all the subsequent books. So when characters appear in a book and then they're seldom heard from again, that seems to be notable. Speaking of cameo appearances, so at the end of the book, they end up in the Gnome King's kingdom. Now, there is a nod to continuity here, kind of. The Gnome King now is Calico, because it was set up in TikTok of Oz, book number 8, that the previous Gnome King was dethroned in favor of his steward, Calico. And Calico was shown to be a much more sensible and, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind disposition. But the Gnome Kingdom is apparently just always the antagonist. So now that they're in the Gnome Kingdom, Calico is the antagonist. To be fair, there is an attempt to address this kind of in the book when Dorothy shows up. She makes some sort of a comment like, "Oh, Calico, we thought you were better, but here you are just being an evil gnome king just like your predecessor." And Calico says something to the effect of, "Well, we can't help it. It's just in our nature as gnomes." Or maybe it's Dorothy who says that. The comment is made that the gnomes can't help but be evil. Also, it's set up that Calico is doing this only because he had been bribed, and that if left to his own devices, he might have been kinder to Prince Inga and his friends. So the part about Dorothy coming in to save the day is clearly a rewrite, because Prince Inga had, by this point, overcome all the obstacles that the Gnome King had set in his way. So it's an unnecessary cameo, but we've got to tie this book into the Oz series somehow, because none of L. Frank Baum's series were selling well at this point, and he needed the money. And then, so it's set up as it always is at the end of these books, that back in the land of Oz, they were aware of everything that goes on. So Glinda, the Good Witch, can see everything in her magic book, which writes down everything that's happening everywhere. And Ozma can see everything that's happening in her magic picture. This has been the case now for the last couple books, where at the end, it turns out that Ozma and Glinda were watching everything happening anyways, and could have intervened at any point, but didn't, which is kind of silly, but it's the continuity that L. Frank Baum is stuck with at this point, because he's already set it up that Glinda the Good Witch can see everything happening in her book, and Ozma can see everything in her magic picture. So I guess this is the format of this, all the stories now. At the very end, it turns out they were watching it the whole time. So Dorothy goes over to save everyone with the blessing of Ozma, and then they all come back to Ozma's palace, where we get cameos from the usual sorts. Trot and Captain Bill from the previous book, also from their own short-lived series. Betsy Bobbin from Book 8. Hungry Tiger and the Cowardly Lion and the Glass Cat. The usual name dropping that happens at the end of the books. And then Rinkitink and Inga go back to their own lands, and leave the land of Oz to go back. I mean, they're still on the Oz map, the Oz and the surrounding countries map, but they're no longer in the land of Oz proper. So, yeah, what to make of this book? Dane, in his written review, says something to the effect of, this is silly. This clearly is not an Oz book. It's a little bit pathetic that is being tied into the series. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sentiment. And he's probably right objectively. I was largely charmed by this book. And again, as with all these Oz books, you have to be willing to forgive a lot of things, both in terms of continuity between the other books within the series and just logical gaps within the series itself. Like, why didn't Ozma intervene earlier? Why didn't the boy ask the White Pearl when he didn't know which way to go when he was looking for his parents? Those type of things. And certainly, if you've stuck with the Oz series this long, you've learned to forgive that kind of stuff, or otherwise you gave up on the series a long time ago. The point of the series is not the logical consistency, but the imagery. So that this paradise little island where everyone is happy with the trees and the beach and the ocean and those types of images. Those are the things I think that stick out in my mind. And then, of course, the memorable characters like Rinkitink, the fat, jolly king, and Bilbo, his surly goat. I also did not mind that it was barely connected with Oz. In fact, I found that was a bit of a refresher. I getting a little bit sick of the Land of Oz and the usual characters by this point, maybe. Or feeling like the Oz series has run its course. And maybe that's a sign that it's just time for me to hang it up and stop reading the Oz series. But I'm committed to it. At the very least, I'm going to finish this book. Dane and I have talked about continuing on with the series past L. Frank Baum. But yeah, it was interesting reading Marie Ness's review, and she largely panned the story as well as something that was not really an Oz story, only just slightly connected with the Oz story. But then there are about 8 comments to that review, and the comments were a repeated theme came up saying, okay, yeah, I know this is barely an Oz story, but I really liked it. It was one of my favorites. It's something different. So it appears that insofar as those comments could be taken as a representative sample, which, yeah, I know that's unscientific, but just go with me. It appears that a number of people felt like this story was a refreshing change of pace by the time they got this far in the Oz series. And I felt it was a refreshing change of pace by the time I got this far in the Oz series myself. So, yeah, I guess that's my review. It was okay.